Hello and welcome to this episode of my Oracle BI video tutorial on how to find the needed data for your reports, or in Oracle BI terms, how to define the right criteria. This is probably the last episode where I will not be making actual reports, but will focus one more time on understanding the report environment in which we make our reports. As always, whatever will be discussed here is almost always applicable to any environment that uses Oracle BI as a reporting solution, but I will be using Oracle Sales Cloud as the application against which I will reflect concepts and on which I will show examples. In the creation process of a report, we always go through a similar set of stages. First off, the analysis phase, where we try to understand the reporting requirements and the end-user expectations. Second, the stage where we go look for the data we need for our report, which is what this episode is all about. Third, a phase in which we transform the data that we found into the data that we need. And finally, the phase in which we focus on how to best visualize the report results in order to provide the best insight in whatever the end user was looking for. This is probably the single most important episode of this series, since whatever we do wrong here will haunt us throughout the rest of the report creation process. Not having the right data at the right level of detail will make whatever follows a waste of time and energy, and will eventually result in us starting all over again. But all of this implies that we actually find the data we need, and that is not something we should always take for granted. In the analysis phase, we should check whether the data we need for the requested report is actually available to the user group that will be using the report. Data availability is something that is typically regulated by the application that is providing the data. Oracle Sales Cloud, for instance, has a component called territory management, where sales teams can be assigned a certain responsibility, for instance, by geography or by product, but also data visibility can be driven by these same rules. There are typically 4 types of information on which users would like to report. Data a user has created himself, of which he is the owner, unless data ownership has been reassigned, of course. Data owned by other people to which the user has been granted access. And then there is the other data in the system to which the user has no access. If we do get a request to make a report on such data, then there are typically 2 ways to fulfill such a request. First off, change the visibility rules to include the information to the set of data to which the user has access. Or use a tool like Oracle BI Delivers to schedule and execute a report using the data visibility rules of a certain user, and then deliver the report per email to users who have no access to that data. More on BI Delivers in a future episode. Analysts who create reports for other people typically have a BI administrator type of role that provide them access to all data, bypassing most of the data visibility rules. It would be hard to make reports on data you cannot see, right? And the last type of data is of course data in another system. For this, we have 2 possible approaches. Or we import the data into our application so we can segment it, apply data visibility rules, and make it available for reporting. Or we export our data to the external system, like a data warehouse, where it can be mixed with all kinds of other data, and then according to the visibility rules there, reports can be ran on the combined data. But for now, let us assume that we always have access to the data we need. Let us look at how we can find it. As I mentioned in the introduction videos to this series, we always start a report by choosing a subject area. I very often get the question, how do I know which subject area to use? And although this is a very good question, I almost always have to answer that people will understand how subject areas work through experience. This is the reason I added this episode to the series, so I can highlight some things I do when choosing a subject area and when selecting the data I need. In that introduction video, I mentioned how a subject area relates to a star schema in the BI business model. Please go and check out that episode before continuing this one if you haven't seen it yet. As I mentioned in that introduction video, choosing a subject area relates to choosing a star schema in the BI business model, which defines the type of data that is made available to me. This star schema, for instance, allows me to report on customers, opportunities, and activities, but not on leads. The star schema contains two types of information. Facts: numbers, indicators, totals, sums that match the dataset. And dimensions: context in which we place these numbers. For instance, I could use this star schema or subject area to make the following reports. A report containing the number of open opportunities for a segmented type of customer that is considering to buy a specific type of product. Or a report listing the number of successful meetings in the context of a specific type of customer that has opportunities in a certain sales stage. So the first thing we end up doing when we make a report is selecting dimensions and facts from the subject area that we have chosen. Let me give you an example on how important it is to understand how subject areas work. List the total of open opportunity revenue for existing customers this year. In Oracle Sales Cloud, I could make a report like this using the subject area Sales, CRM, Opportunities and Products. From the customer dimension, I would choose name. From the time dimension, I would choose year. And from the pipeline facts, I would choose open opportunity revenue. Furthermore, I would add two filters. One, to only look at numbers for this year, as requested, and one to only look at existing customers, not prospects. Let us have a look at the results. And here are my customers, and for the current year, the open opportunity revenue. Perfect. But immediately, a few questions come to mind. Was that the fiscal year or the calendar year? It just said year. And does this year relate to the moment the opportunity is supposed to close? Or the individual revenue lines? Since I know it is possible to have opportunities with multiple revenue lines, and it is possible to close a revenue line and have a signed order for it without having had closed the remainder of the opportunity, which might only close next year, and thereby should be excluded from this list, if that is how this year should have been used. I know that all of this might sound a bit silly, since how often might these cases occur, right? Well, it only needs to occur once for your report to be wrong, and for everyone to lose trust in the results of your report, and nobody ever using it again. Most often though, hopefully always, the way subject areas work and should be used is documented. The documentation for Oracle Sales Cloud, for example, is publicly available on the internet and evolves over time like the application does. The documentation contains descriptions like when should the subject area be used, what type of reports can be built, and which persona could benefit from reports built here. But also detailed information about the dimensions and facts. For instance, a detailed explanation on how the time dimension works is available. This can help us with understanding how this year should be interpreted. When using pipeline facts like we did, time relates to the expected close date of the opportunity. If we would have used pipeline detail facts, time would have related to the expected close date of the revenue line. Besides knowing how facts and dimensions should be used, it is also important to understand in what way dimensions are related. Imagine an oversimplified example where we would just list customers. Notice how we have customer names starting with ABC. If I now add the number of activities to the report, I have less customers listed in total. The customer names starting with ABC are gone. Since we combined customer information with activity information, the automatic reaction of the BI engine was to filter out customers without activities, to only list customers with related activities. But what if we had to report on customers that had no activities? Or make a list of customers with and without activities? This is of course possible too. What we just saw was just a default behavior of the BI engine. All we need to do is tell it that we do not want it to hide these customers. This is called exception reporting, or sometimes also negative reporting. Reporting on data that is not there. There are no activities for these customers. It is reporting on the relationships that are not there. There are no related activities to these customers. Under Edit Analysis, under Data, through the option Include Null Values, all of a sudden, I also retrieve the customers without activities again. Some might find this quite complicated, and indeed, I would call this a very sophisticated feature. But do not forget, we are using BI Answers here. This is a tool for analysts to make sophisticated reports. There is always the BI Composer in Oracle Sales Cloud for end users to make basic, simple reports in a much more intuitive way. Let us dig further in the options we have to assemble our dataset. What if one subject area was not enough? What if, for instance, we had to make a report that requires us to list the activities that we executed against leads that led to closed and won opportunities for a certain product against a specific type of customer, hoping we could understand what activities on leads led to successful opportunities, so we can copy these as best practices in order to try and increase our win rate overall. That sounds like a legitimate business requirement, right? Well, for this example, there is not one subject area that contains all data. This subject area here gets closed though. It can show which won and closed opportunities contain the products for the type of customer we were looking for. But unfortunately, it doesn't contain any information on leads or their activities. Since the business model understands how subject areas and their star schemas are related, we can actually add multiple subject areas to our reports. By adding a subject area, we can include the activities related to the leads, related to the opportunities, to the products, to the customers we were looking for. This might again sound a bit far-fetched, and indeed, this will not happen very often, but in case you need this technique, it's good to know it exists. All you need to do, once you have selected the dimensions and the facts of the first subject area, you use this little icon to add or remove subject areas. Very simple, just select the subject area you need, and from here on, select the dimensions and the facts you were looking for. There are also options to combine subject areas when there is absolutely no logical relationship between them, or when you do not want to use a relationship. For instance, this subject area could help us build a pipeline report by listing the opportunities in the different sales stages and their open opportunity revenue value. By combining this subject area with a subject area on leads, we could actually build an extended pipeline report, including the leads that one day, hopefully, also will become opportunities. We can use popular high school math techniques to combine datasets by just adding results together using union, using only data that two datasets have in common using intersect, or use data that two datasets do not have in common using minus. Once you have the results of your first dataset, through this little icon, I can select a second subject area that I can combine using any of these methods. But this is a very advanced technique I will be addressing in a separate episode. One last thing before we start filtering out data. I want to give a shout out to the most used and least fancy visualization technique we have available, the ordinary table. Tables are what they are. Boring, endless lists of information that are more often used to export data to Excel than anything else. More on exporting to Excel in the episode where I discussed the BI desktop plugin options included in the Oracle BI suite. But when creating reports, tables are your best friend. Even if you only need a pie chart or a performance style, always make sure that your tables look good, since these are the only visualization forms that show all columns, all column values, null values, totals, and number of records. These are very valuable at understanding why a report is maybe behaving not as expected, why a pie chart is missing a slice, or why a pivot table does not want to show a row total. Tables are great for debugging and for understanding and verifying the data you selected. Once you select the facts and dimensions you want to build your report upon, you are left with all the data that you have visibility rights to. The next step is to filter out the data that you do not need. Filters do what they do. Most of them are not worth mentioning. Filters like is equal to, or is not equal to, or a number is greater than. A few filters, though, are interesting enough to briefly discuss here. Notice here that some of these opportunities do not have an open opportunity revenue value. It doesn't mean that the value is zero. The value is not there. It does not exist. This is because the opportunities are closed, and therefore they no longer have an open opportunity revenue value. In technical terms, the value for this column is what we call nil or null. And again, it means there is no value or the value is unknown. In order to filter out these opportunities, we can use a very special filter. We can say that we only want to see opportunities where the open opportunity revenue value is not nil. And now these opportunities are gone. Another very interesting filter is a filter that allows us to make rankings. In this case, I could filter on open opportunity revenue value and only keep those that are in the top 10. And now I'm left with only those opportunities who have one of the top 10 highest open opportunity revenue values. Notice how I created a filter here that will make sure that I only see opportunities for those customers that are located in the country, the United Kingdom. Instead of hard-coding this filter to the United Kingdom, I also could ask the user to choose the country before he runs the report. This is done through a prompt. Under prompts, I can define prompts, and in this case I'm going to use a column prompt so that the user can choose from the available values for country one or more through a choice list countries that we want to filter on. Once a user has chosen one or more countries through this prompt, we need to provide this information to a filter. And we do this through the isPrompted filter. So now a user can choose a country in the prompt. The prompt is given to the filter, and the filter will make sure we only see those countries. And the results? I don't see the prompt straight away. If I want to see the prompt, I will have to go into preview mode. There is my prompt. And here are my opportunities just for the United Kingdom. The most special filter, though, is one where I can base the filter on the results of another analysis, on the results of another report. But this is something I will discuss in a separate episode. Check out this filter. It will make sure I will only see opportunities that will close in the year 2015. Notice how it is perfectly possible to have a filter based on a column that is not shown in my report. What I do not like about this filter, though, is that the year is hard-coded to the year 2015. Next year, if I still would be using this report, I would have to open it up again, change the filter before I could use it in 2016. And all because I just hard-coded the year. In order to avoid these types of hard-coding filters, we can use something called variables. Variables are defined in the BI business model and represent a value that will change over time without that the user or a report creator have to do anything. There are three types of variables. First off, session variables. Variables that are unique to a session, like who is the logged on user. Using this who is logged on variable in a filter, I can make a report that includes a filter where opportunity owner equals to whoever's logged on. A report I now can give to anybody who asks for it, and the report will only show data that is relevant to the user who is using it. Second, repository variables. Variables that change over time but are the same for everybody, like a variable that contains the current year. This is the variable I could have used in the previous example in order not to hardcode the year to 2015. A third kind of variables are called presentation variables, but I will discuss them in the episode on dashboards. As a report designer, it is important to understand which variables have been defined for your BI instance. Oracle Sales Cloud variable documentation can be found on the Oracle support website. Now imagine a report where you have chosen a few dimensions and a fact, added a clever filter, and when I check out the results, I no longer have data. What does that mean? Well, it can mean two things. Or this is unexpected behavior, and I just have too many filters or too restrictive filters. In any case, there is an issue, and the issue needs to be found and solved. Or this is actually expected behavior. It is actually a good thing, and the goal of the report was to look for data that was wrong in the system. Not having results would then correspond to no wrong data. In this case, it is important to know that we can influence the message a user gets to see. Very often, the message a user gets to see when a report contains no data is very technical, when it could be replaced with a business-driven message like this. All you need to do is under Edit Analysis Properties, change the default message to a custom message. There we go. That was it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I hope you picked up a few things. Join me again in one of the following episodes where we will finally start making real reports.